Hello, everybody. Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Thursday's edition, and happy to have you with us today, folks. We've got a lot to cover. We are broadcasting from Delray Beach, Florida, and I want to welcome back my special guest from Chicago, Tom Amenta. Happy to have you with me today. Glad to be on Schaftlein Report.
Glad to be with you. Hey, Happy New Year, brother. Haven't talked to you since the start of 2023. It's good to see you.
Yeah, great to see you too, Tom. And boy, do we have some stuff to cover today. I want to talk about the economic news, then we're going to get to some breaking news. But hey, listen, we got a report out this morning that was pretty damn good. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
The economy grew 2.9% in the fourth quarter, up slightly over estimates, 2.1% in 2022 for the whole year. Mm-hmm. Tom, that's a pretty good number considering, everything that's been thrown at this economy.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that, we've talked some skepticism about the Fed and what they're doing. I got to give Powell some credit. It seems that so far with the interest rate hikes and so far with allowing the supply chains to unsnarl themselves, it seems like he kind of found the Goldilocks so far, inflation's coming down, things are cooling. I mean, even the sector that I work in, which is tech, which is an absolute bloodbath right now, when it comes to people being let go and things like that, there is in a macro forces economy sort of perspective, and the overhiring the sector did during COVID, look, I'm biased as I'll get out when it comes to, me and, my day to day. So, I'm not happy to see it, but I can certainly understand it being looked at as a market correction type sign, given where most of these companies in the industry went during COVID and things like that. So in a broad strokes, it's also kind of I'll stop short of a positive sign so much as one that says that the economy is sort of coming back into line with where we'd expect it. And it's moving away from some of these hyperinflation and problematic areas that we've seen, for the past, 6 to 9 months.
Well, you've seen a lot of tech layoffs announced from various companies like Microsoft, Google. I could go on and on. Some handle it better than others. But what's striking about it, it's mainly focused apparently on white collar technology jobs. I'm not seeing any layoffs anywhere across the country, blue collar or factors or anything like that. Tom, FYI, here in Palm Beach County, where I'm broadcasting from, our unemployment rate here is 2.2%. Mm-hmm. I mean, nationwide, it's around 3.5 or so. So, first time unemployment claims came out, Tom, it's 186,000.
Yeah.
I mean, these are hitting low numbers. So I'm in your camp. I think you have to give the Fed a lot of credit. And people on Wall Street that cry and whine over high interest rates, I mean, there's just no evidence to support that there's economic slowdown other than, look, we know the tech situation. Okay, You talked about it. It's sort of well documented. Enterprise software companies, we had a lot of excess hiring, a lot of tech companies. They're sort of paying the price for it, okay? But the general economy outside of the real estate market, which is cooled considerably, obviously that relationship I answered. Tom, the overall economy is clipping along reasonably well. I can't think of a good reason why the Fed wouldn't tick up another 25 to 50 basis points over the next meeting or two.
Yeah, I think that, I'm hoping for the 25 basis points. And also full disclosure, I'm looking to, rebuy into the Chicago market because I have some built-in advantages being a veteran that other people don't. So for me, I'd love to see, 25 and not 50, but that's a little selfish. But yeah, to that point, it doesn't seem like the economy overall is doing that. I think that also we're being helped right now by the dollar being one of those heavyweight currencies. I think that, China's got its own problems. So I think that that's helping in terms of container shipping costs and and cost of goods, there in the transportation, which is really helping. And then also I'm going to tell on my industry in tech for a minute. It's one of those things that people look at those jobs and they want them so much just because they almost to a company get as close as you can to overpaying a market without quite doing it. And, all the benefits and stuff. Like, I've got Patagonia and North Face jackets and Arc'teryx pole. I mean, like, all of this high level, like, outdoor apparel and stuff that's branded, that it's just, I mean, no other industry in the world decides that, that's they're going to do, other than like big finance, right? I mean, those are the two industries where you make the joke about the Patagonia vested, bro walking around. So, you're really privileged if you can get into the industry. And, the other perspective too is I'm just old enough to remember, I was living in Washington State, just south of Seattle, when I was in the military for my first 3 years. And that was right when the dot-com bubble burst. 25% of the tech sector lost their jobs. A full 25% got shed during that. And this is nothing like that. This is really, as stressful as it makes me a little bit personally, it's really very clearly a market correction against that sort of final phase of COVID lifestyle, which is just another good thing in the macro for the economy when it's all said and done. It means we're going to start building back, and, tech's resilient. It's going to come back.
It will. What's amazing to me? I saw comments out of the White House today. Chevron announces their profit. They're going to do stock buybacks, a big shock, and they're paying dividends, a big shock.
Yep.
Why is the government trying to tell Chevron, a public company, what to do with their money? I mean, it's just astounding to me. Are they so far left in the White House they don't understand capitalism? Oil prices, gas prices have come down significantly over the last year. And the fact that, Chevron's managing its business, it did the buybacks, it pays a dividend. A lot of widows, orphans, normal people rely on that dividend from Chevron.
Yep.
Why is the government complaining about companies doing great? I just don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I don't understand that. It's meant to be this cheap punching bag, in my opinion, against, green initiatives and things like that. And which you and I have had so many conversations about that being a disingenuous argument. I don't feel like we need to go down that road.
No.
The one sort of caveat I would say is, if you're Chevron, read the room a little bit. Like, you don't need to put the $75 billion all on your fourth quarter books. You know what I'm saying? There's no reason that you can't do end of year, mid year, and sort of soften it a little bit, because it's that number, the average person who doesn't understand the market and doesn't understand finance and what all that does, the way that you and I do and follow and have spent a lot of our lives to understand. I understand the average person looking at that number, looking at, where some of that came from, and like not understanding it. And if I had been in Chevron's boardroom, I'd probably make a slightly different decision, mostly just to sort of meet it out by quarter or biannually to sort of soften that, so it doesn't get some of the uneducated backlash, because it's still backlash. But your overall point, like the people that should be critiquing that is not the White House. Okay, right. Like that's not what they should be doing.
Right. Let them critique the business losing money. I mean, we have a great American company here providing a service, and these people are tone deaf in the White House. They're saying, well, they should be producing more oil. Well, I thought you wanted to produce less oil. I mean, come on, get the message straight.
And that's the other thing. They just do not have a functioning, I've never understood, and you and I've had so many conversations about this. Like, I just do not understand the White House's energy policy, this current administration at all. And I don't understand the roadmap that they have to try and reduce carbon emissions. Like, climate change is a factor. It's a real world thing. Like, I think that almost every reasonable person on planet Earth can admit that it's doing something. But how you're going to solve it, what you're going to do, and how you're going to balance, keeping this nation moving, keeping the world moving, forget just the United States, and finding ways to reduce these things in pragmatic, intelligent ways has always been a balance point. And the administration's inability to interact or have a solid, coherent strategy with companies like Chevron, energy companies, or it just shows how much they're floundering, much like I am, to try and figure out what they're doing. So,
well, let me shift away from the economy now. I want a big international story, and then we're going to get to a domestic one. But Tom, you're a veteran. Okay, you served our country. Give me your impressions of NATO supplying tanks to Ukraine. And then, again, those are going to get there pretty quick because they're already there. And then the U.S. to supply Abrams tanks, which people have the wrong impression. They're not going to be there in a week or 2 weeks or even a month. Yeah. It's going to take a while. But the point is, whether it's NATO or the United States stepping up and providing sophisticated tank weaponry, that's a big deal. What are your thoughts as a veteran on that?
So first thing on the Abrams, they're not going to get there for 6 months at the earliest. They, one of the things that they said is that these are ones that are not coming out of American stockpiles. They need to be produced before they're sent over there. If I'm being totally honest, one of the things that I noticed with all of that is I wonder if that wasn't the overhead air cover the German government needed to release the Leopards at large, because the Leopard is a much, much better tank for what the Ukrainians need. It goes with diesel fuel, not jet fuel. It's not a jet turbine engine, which are unbelievably finicky. It's a much lighter tank. Like the current version of the Abrams is 75 tons compared to 60 for the Leopard. Same main battle gun, roughly the same optics, German versus Americans. There's a slight difference. So in terms of firepower and use and usability and everything like that, the Leopard's always been a much better tank. It's always been able to get to the front faster. It's easier to train on. So I think that on some levels, we're sending 31 is as much about the optics and allowing the German government to say, see, we're in this together. Because, they're talking about all the way up to 2024 before they finally all get delivered. Okay. Anyone who knows for supply chain and things like that, that's just such a long lead.
So we're not taking these out of our inventory.
We are not taking these out of American stockpiles. They need to be produced, is what I read and is what my understanding is. Now, to giving the tanks, I think that's one. I think it shows increasing confidence from NATO in the West that we really think the Ukrainians can win. Which is awesome.
But they have to win. They have to win. Yeah.
Well, they have to. They have to. We've always known they had to, but from the time that we first started talking about this, wondering if they were going to hold out for a month to now, and I think that it will, if they're trained up right and they utilize them correctly, they're a great way to punch a hole in a line and get all the armor, the Bradleys and the Strykers and all these, the MREPs and all these other up armored vehicles that we've given them for troop personnel to get them, in more of a maneuver blitzkrieg warfare and sort of end this stalemate that you're seeing across most of these lines. It is a tool that they need. And for as many people we have all the Russian ones. The Russian T-72 tank sucks. Okay. Everyone knows it does. It's why American and NATO forces are always licking their chops if we were ever going to get into a shooting war for the past 20 years, because we could see them from behind a berm and put a depleted uranium shell right through it to blow the tank up, and they can't even see us, right? The T-90 is a pretty decent main battle tank that the Soviets have, but they're getting chewed up, right? But the Ukrainians and those 72s weren't going to do much. They need a little bit of added firepower if they're going to really push through this. And we've already supplied them with, once you can punch the holes, how you move through, how you get people where they need to go. And hey, if they can get the Donbass back, if they can go into Crimea and be effective, that changes the calculus radically for Russia. Oh, yeah. And I think that these are the things that they need to do. And I think that the way this package has been put together is, I bet the Polish tanks are probably in the Ukraine already. They couldn't wait to get them there. Yeah. The Germans are going to come quickly. There's just so many other Eastern European countries that have that Leopard 2 that's going to get it there in a hurry. I'm sure eventually a few Abrams will filter in, but I really think it's way more about it looking the right way with those Abrams as opposed to, those things.
Well, the Russians they responded by firing multiple missiles at Ukraine, not military targets, killed 11 people, civilian buildings. This is disgusting stuff. Mm-hmm. One thing I have seen is that NATO and U.S. is going to have to sort of step up and help with the ammunition. I've been seeing reports that some of the ammunition's running low. That can't happen. Okay, that's sort of got to be fixed. But I'm in your camp. I think they should be doing everything we can, because obviously the Ukrainians have demonstrated they can win. Now, will they? It's to be determined. But if you continue to have NATO support, U.S. support from all of Western Europe, that's got to help them out. So,
absolutely. I will say, because of course Zelensky is ever the salesman and ever the let's see if I can get more guy. Which I appreciate for the most part. He's now asking for F-16s, and I'm starting early. I'm starting often. I'm starting publicly. We shouldn't give him F-16s. We should give him A-10s. If they really want close air support, if they really want a platform that is going to get things done from the air, you don't have to worry about the surface-to-air missiles as much. They're durable. I really don't want to hear this F-16 thing. Like, I don't want to hear about Gen 4 fighters. I want to hear about A-10s. That's what we should be giving them.
What's the difference for our audience? What's the difference between an A-10 and an F?
So an F-16 is a multi-use jet fighter that it can do air-to-air, it can do air-to-ground. It's a multi-versatile, and electronics and everything have been upgraded what you would call a Gen 4 fighter, right? So like if you've seen Top Gun Maverick and the 5th generation fighter, which is what an F-35 is, you know, the mythical boogeyman sort of they had in that movie. Like that's the best, that's the state of the art. And then the 16, depending on where it was produced in the series and its electronic package, can be the one level of that. An A-10 is basically a tank that flies. Like wow. Okay. It's got a 25 millimeter chain gun on the front of it, and its entire perspective and its design. It's called the Warthog. It's an ugly looking plane. The engines are at the back, so like even if one gets hit, you know, it's kind of hard to hit the engines. If one gets hit, it's got a lot more likely to survive the encounter and things like that. It's just this. It's literally a flying thing. I mean, it's designed to go low on the battlefield and just blow up tanks and armored personnel carriers. That's what it's designed to do. So when I started hearing this, like yeah, they definitely need some more aircraft. They definitely need some more planes like that. But they can fly their MiGs. They can fly the MiG-29 versus MiG-29s if they want air to air. That's please, let's do that. And then if they really want the air to ground, the A-10 is the best platform to do it anyway. It's a cost-effective thing. We've been trying to get rid of it in the American Air Force, so they keep stopping it for years. So we've got some that are on mothballs that they can dust back off, fire back up, teach them how to fly them, and really make the impact that gets needed, and that is in the air-to-ground battlefield. So sometimes I wonder, like, if we're giving them these toys just so we can see how they perform, so we can update them for ourselves, which may or may not. But in this case, the right tool is not the F-16, in my opinion. The right tool for the battle space and what they're saying they need is the A-10. And we've got a bunch of them that we could give them, and I hope we get them to them soon, to be honest. I just really don't want to see 16 ripping around.
Yeah. What did you make of sort of talking about international issues? What did you make about the Intelligence Committee? McCarthy kept his promise to kick Schiff and Swalwell off the Intelligence Committee, even after Hakeem Jeffries nominated him. I mean, Schiff is a congenital liar. How could anyone keep Schiff on a committee? I actually applauded McCarthy for keeping his promise here.
So, I mean, he had to. In order to get the speakership, he had to do that. Like the compromise he had. Where I land on this is actually where Victoria Spatz, the Republican from Indiana, lands on it, and that is, you know, I don't like the lack of decorum. And you've heard me say things like this before.
Yes.
I don't like the lack of decorum where it's like, okay, so the Dems didn't like Gosser and MTG, who you all know on this show, I'm not a fan of her, but like, so we're going to kick them off their committees, you know, nah. So now it's like, we're just going to like flip it back around. And we're, you know, at some point, part of what you have to do to legislate is compromise. And yeah, like I'm not the biggest Schiff fan on earth. I mean, who really can be when you know who that guy is? You know, I think Swalwell is sort of cut from more that AOC, like, look at me type vein rather than, you know, Schiff's literal shiftiness. Right. You know, but at the same time, just because you don't like them and just because, you know, you have a chance where you think you can push them down on the playground, like, how about you just be an adult and do your job? You know, I find Omar, frankly, a little more problematic on the Foreign Affairs Committee. And that's just because I think she's anti-Semitic, and I think that there's a very real case to be made there, similar to the concerns of MTG. If we're going to go back to her for a second about, you know, and some of the QAnon things that she had said, and like, was she going to be viable for the committee that she was on? Like, I thought the two of them, I think there's a real question, but for Schiff and Swalwell or Gosser, just because you don't like them, like,
well, Schiff, though, he's a liar. I mean, what do you like? I mean, by the way, Schiff has announced he's going to run for that California Senate seat.
Yeah.
You know, he announced it today. So he's going to join Katie Porter in that race. Don't tell him who else. But I didn't really have a problem with Schiff. I just didn't, because Schiff lied about a lot of stuff, Tom. You know, on that Trump stuff that was going on. And literally made up stories. I mean, you got to have some integrity there.
Yeah, and maybe I should think about this a little more. I just saw this story, and my first thought was, oh, great, we're just going to quid pro quo the stupid in Congress again. You know what I mean? And for Swalwell, there's nothing that's going to change my mind about that one. Like, but you know, yeah, Schiff is definitely more problematic. He's definitely got more of that Omar MTG to him that I do see. I see your point though. That's fair and well taken. It's just the macro of all of it and the optics of it. I'm just not a fan of on either side of the aisle. Period. It's like I want to see you do your job, not throw stones at each other. So
well, they're going to have to do their job because there is some negotiations going on in debt. But we'll cross that bridge later. Listen, we had I don't want to say this is a breaking story, but we had a domestic issue we need to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And Tom, that's, the city of Memphis has been somewhat on edge, and things are moving rapidly, folks. So by the time you're seeing this show or listening to it, things could have changed. Mm-hmm. But that city's on edge. There is a police video pending viewership. A man was driving, car got pulled over. Most people in this country, the car gets pulled over. Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. To the police officer. That didn't happen here. Apparently, the guy got out of the car, started running. Again, we're not going to editorialize here because these facts are really new coming out, folks. So we're not doing that here. We're just sort of stating what we know. Takes off running. He's pursued by 5 police officers. Apparently, they caught up to him. Let me read the quote here. According to the police chief who fired these 5, excessive force was used. Now, the victim eventually died a couple days later in the hospital. Yep. Okay. Now, late breaking news today, these 5 police officers who were fired by the police chief were charged with second-degree murder, among other charges against these individuals. Here's the key question is this, and really relates to the media. In this case, we've seen the issues where white officers, black victim. In this case, the victim was black. The 5 police officers were black. The head of the police department is an African-American woman. So far, at least what I've seen, the case is being treated properly, meaning it shouldn't matter whether you're white, black, or you're Hispanic, whatever. It should be treated not based on race, and that is happening. But Tom, the fact is, in this case, there will be people discussing race because of the fact that everyone involved in this case is African-American.
Yeah, and I really hope people stay away from that.
You know they won't.
I know they won't. I'm being the king of wishful thinking, and that's totally fair. It's one of those things that anytime I have conversations about police brutality and the interplay, I always point out that I talk to at least 2 dozen of my friends that are at various levels of law enforcement, whether it's a city, or township, it's a county, it's state, a couple on the federal force, and none of them thought that when what Derek Chauvin did to George Floyd was acceptable from a purely procedural thing. Forget everything else and strip it down. It's like the minute someone's are handcuffed behind their back, you take your knee off their neck, right? Like, period. And the fact that that is just an open and shut law enforcement 101. From everything that I've read, and I want to also, like you said, be very clear that this is very new. I have not been nearly as well read on the issue because it's so quickly developing as the way that I normally, you know me, I'm big on prep. But from what I have read and from what I have seen, it sounds like 5 guys went and grabbed one dude who, from every picture I've seen, wasn't a particularly large man and beat him up. That is just and that is a question of police use of force and excessive force. And I'm first of all, my first thing out the gate was just like, okay, it's 5-on-1. 5-on-1, and everyone says that he was unarmed from the beginning, right? Like, there wasn't a question of guns. There wasn't a question, like, that's already a problem, in this country. And what I really hope where this is there's a legitimate, I live in Chicago. Okay. I live in one of the cities that has, in the South side and the West side, has some of the most problematic violence. I think I said this on the show, but if I haven't, like, I used to live in the same apartment building as a very young Chicago PD officer. And he was so excited one day, like we met, and I realized he didn't have a proper tourniquet med kit. So I grabbed one of mine from, and I gave it to him. I'm like, yo, dude, you actually need this. I just keep this in my car for emergencies, right? And a couple weeks later, comes running out, and he's all excited. I'm like, Tom, you got to see this. I'm like, yo, dude, what's up? all the young guys are on the west or the south side. That's how they pick up their overtime. They take the weekend shifts, so that the older guys don't. It's the only way that they're so low on the total pool, they're going to get overtime, and that they're going to make any money. He's got AK-47, okay, 7.62 bullet holes in the back quarter panel of his SUV, and he's excited about it. He's like, "Look at this!" I'm like, "You never heard?" I just looked at him. I go, "You never heard the shot, did you?" He's like, "What?" I go, "You didn't hear it." I go, "You never heard this, did you?" He's like, "Well, no." I go, "Yeah, it's a canyon effect." I go, "Do you realize how scared you should be from this?" I go, "These are fully automatic military grade weapons, potentially fully automatic, but certainly military grade weapons that you're getting shot at. You can't even hear it, man." And you just watch, mid-20s, he just suddenly gets it. I'm like, dude, and I went upstairs. I got another. I had 3 kits. I grabbed another one and I gave it to him. Like, keep this in your car or give this to your partner. Like, this is real, man. Like, you're going to see some things if you keep doing this job, that people see in war. So I mean, I'm very aware. I've got friends. I understand how some of these things are. Like, if that dude that lived in my complex, if someone pulls a gun and starts shooting, he shoots back. That's required. That's a necessity of the job. Yeah. But I also know plenty of Chicago PD guys that decide they want to go looking for a fight because the neighborhood's a bad neighborhood and they've gotten shot at before and it's been years and years. And they find some dude that they can just beat up because they can beat him. Say what you will about it, but The Wire and We Own This City on HBO, those 2 shows do a really good job of showing what happens when law enforcement gets out of hand. A little sensationalized, a little editorialized. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying it's a one-for-one perfect, but you certainly see a certain level of it. And what I hope the conversation can be about is an actual real discussion that this nation needs to have, regardless of race, okay, really rooted predominantly in the socioeconomics of a lot of these poor and impoverished areas, right? Which do have also racial issues and stuff, but the core of this is the economics of it. And how we can start talking about what violence in areas can do, what responsibility law enforcement has to be a standard bearer, and how all these pressures come together to make a really complicated toxic soup. Now, are we going to? Of course we're not. This is the age of Twitter. We have 280 characters, and I just spent 5 minutes. But, I am so far in this very, very early stage from what I've seen across from the far left to the far right and everything in between from the news sources I've looked at. It does seem like they are really trying to have the conversation of police violence and understanding that law enforcement isn't perfect, which it isn't. Although there are far more good cops than there are bad cops by a wide majority.
99 to 1, 99. Yeah. But again, on this thing, I want to be careful. I want to be careful on this because so many times the initial reports in these type of cases turn out to be wrong. So on this show, we're not being judgmental. We're just sort of presenting what we know right now. I hope, Tom, that what this does not turn into is a racial thing, because I think it should be at a point, okay, the fact is, the 5 police happen to be black, the victim was black, and the police chief is, that shouldn't be the subject, but it will be the subject. And my concern is, once that video comes out, I don't want to see this spread to other cities where we get, what happens in the summer, the marches, all that kind of, you can't paint people like that. Okay. So this is going to be a big story. It's going to go on for a while. But at least on this show, we're not going to be prejudging.
And I will say this: if an individual or a group of people or a news outlet or someone wants to make this about race, okay, it is a fact that this person was black, that died. It is a fact, like you said, that all 5 officers, and it's not hard to find the pictures of all 5 of these guys, were all also black. Okay. What to me, I'm actually, the one thing I'm grateful for this is the ultimate bellwether, in my opinion. And if you want to approach this discussion with me personally, of you telling on yourself, if you want to turn it into what you just said, because it's not. This is a question of potential police brutality.
I agree with you.
This is a question of force versus excessive force. This is a question of what obligation does law enforcement have to society at large, versus feeling the need to protect itself in a potentially hairy situation. Those facts are not out yet, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. That needs to develop. Those are real issues.
That should be
real discussion points.
Yeah,
and that's where we should be talking about this. But if they want to talk it the other way, well, thank you for telling on yourself. I don't want to talk to you anymore. Like, I just don't. Like, it's just not
you
that.
As the moderate voice, and me as the conservative voice, we're in absolute agreement on this point. All right, let me close it out with this. Not that it's important, but Tom, you saw the story. Trump has been repatriated to Facebook, Instagram.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of like, does anyone really care at this point? He's got his own social media platform. I mean, does it matter, Tom? I guess, 2 years better late than never.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it does if he's very serious about running in 2024. It really does. It's just his ability to reach a larger audience that is also not super already far right, the way that Truth Social is. It matters. If he also comes back on to Twitter and the ability to just push out information literally at warp speed, he was so effective with that just as a communicator. Like him, dislike him. You can write an MBA case study on the effectiveness of rapid communication and viral messaging through how him and his team use Twitter. I mean, I've been working on these platforms and as a marketer and in an influencer, even all the way back to 2008 in MySpace. Okay, like this is something I know a lot about. So in terms of his ability to send messages out, to get to his base, to potentially attract new people under his banner, which is already gonna be hard because of his brand and like sort of who he is. But in the Republican field, especially in the primary, yeah, it's really important. I think it really does matter. This is the way we communicate. Now, am I a little worried given his track record and given how he's choosing to use his own personal platform? Oh, yes, absolutely. Would I have done this were I Mark Zuckerberg? Probably not, if I'm being completely honest, just because I don't want to deal with all what's going on right now. I just wouldn't want, I had already made a decision. It had already been there. No one, to your point of what you're saying, no one was really advocating for him to come back or anything like this. It's just like them putting themselves in the news cycle. Like, that's why I wouldn't have done it. But
yeah, but I mean, eventually he's going to get back because, he's got Truth Social, he'll be on Twitter.
Yeah.
I mean, look, it'll be, whatever his outcome will be more about his policies and his performance rather than if he's on or not on a social media platform, I think. But I think it's good. I think it's good that it happened. Summation. All right, we got about a minute left. Tom, with all this stuff in the news now, the economy, Ukraine, domestic police issue, what are we going to be talking about over the next, couple of weeks here?
Oh my gosh. You know what? I honestly don't know, Mark. I think that this is so crazy, but I do want to take a couple of seconds because when the Trump classified documents were coming out, I got on the show and I was like, lock him up if this is true. And I just want to be very clear that I've got the exact same smoke for Biden. I mean, to the letter, I changed everything that I said about Trump. Go back and watch the tape. I want it exactly for Biden. I'm willing to give Pence a slight pass until that develops, only because it sounds like what was classified for him were like travel memos and stuff like that. And that I actually can see. It wasn't TSSCI. I could totally see how someone screws that up. Like, I'm not unreasonable. But in terms of the current president and the former president and not being able to lock this stuff down, no. It's the same thing for him. I would say, if anything, it's worse for Biden in terms of the manifestation of it, because they're saying that he's been keeping some of this since his time in the Senate. Okay, so don't tell me you didn't know, right? Don't tell me it was an oops. Okay, you've been having it for 20 something years. So just because I wasn't there when it broke, but I feel like, as with me, I like being as fair as possible and moderate. I've got every bad thing to say about the current president, and I think he should go to jail just as much as I should think the old guy should for the handling of this.
I will take the opposite side of this a little bit, and you'll be shocked by what I'm going to tell you. But I've said on the previous couple shows, this is going to be like in a football game where we're going to have, personal foul number 78 defense, personal foul number 89 offense, penalties offset. I don't believe anything's going to happen on any of this to either one of them. And frankly, I don't think, my gut feeling tells me we overclassify too many documents. I think the whole system ought to be reviewed because from what I have seen, and again, I haven't seen these docs, but I'm anecdotally hearing, some of this stuff is not as significant on both sides. Look, I'm not critical.
I get this is personal to me because I've had a clearance before, and I know what happened to me and anybody else, unless you were these two guys. What would have happened? I would have come out and steal bracelets. I would have a very expensive lawyer right now, and I'd be begging for my life with no literally. So it's a little personal for me. So this is why I'm like, and I'm even more frustrated again with Kurt Mr. He's had him even longer. Okay.
But do you think my analysis is correct? You think it's
without seeing, I'm not going to say definitively because I haven't seen the documents, and unless I know what it is, I'm not due. Do I think that we overclassify? Yes. Do I think that there's actually a really fair point? The Pentagon sometimes purposely overclassify something so it doesn't get to the media, and there's times that I feel personally conflicted about that. Yes, absolutely. I do not think that your net thesis is necessarily incorrect. I just have this big carve out because I haven't seen it. I'm not going to say that what they were holding on as individuals fits what you're saying, but to your net point, I do think that some of the things that were labeled that I've seen as secret speak cat, which is compartmentalized, or top secret SCI, made me chuckle back in the day. Okay, it was like wait, that okay, So I don't think that you're wrong there necessarily. I do think that these are still the standards. These are still the rules. This is a very clear thing that unless you happen to have been a current or former president, the rules don't seem to apply to you. Right. But everybody else in the world with a very serious problem, and I just don't want to hear it. Okay, I just don't like.
Right. You appropriately said if it was you, you'd be hiring an expensive lawyer. Two former presidents, one current president, one former. Different story. Tom, thanks for your opinions today. It is great having you back on the show. And we're going to do this a little more often. We've made some adjustments, but I love the commentary, the debate. I know our audience does too. So thank you for joining me today. It's been my pleasure.
As always, brother, I love being on, and anytime you want me on, I'm just a phone call away.
We also have to give you our football selection for the weekend. Remember last week we were 4-0 straight up, 3 out of 4 against the point spread. Well, this week we like Cincinnati over Kansas City. That point spread has moved +1, -1 right now. I think it's even. We'll take the Bengals to win that game. And in the Eagles-San Francisco game, the Eagles are 2.5-point favorites. We are going to pick an upset. Yes, we're going with the 49ers to upset the Eagles. So we're calling for a Cincinnati-San Francisco Super Bowl. We'll be back on Tuesday, and you'll see how we did. And we think Cincinnati-San Francisco. Good luck to all you gamblers out there. All right, folks, that's it for today. Listen, we will tackle the issues next week. A lot of what we talked about will still be in the news next week, so you'll be hearing from us. Have a great weekend coming up. We'll see you next week.